reverse shoulder press, reverse pullover, reverse row, reverse overhead press, and reverse barbell row. Reverse refers to the emphasis at the joint, pulling the connecting structures in the reverse direction that life is forcing them into. Life will round the upper spine, pull the neck forward, and take the shoulder and scapula along with it, creating compression everywhere along these areas. Now, normal pressing and pulling motions are great for activating the muscles, but what if the joints themselves are the issue? It's like trying to build a mansion on a pile of sand. The foundation is faulty. But once you fix the foundation, you can be sure that the structures you're activating and building will actually develop strength and function for not only sport, but day-to-day activity, leading to more pain-free ability. But as far as you know, it could be just blowing smoke. So what does the science say? For those dealing with rotator cuff issues, manual therapy and resistance training has been shown to lead to greater shoulder satisfaction, less symptoms, and less disability compared to just resistance training alone. The motions I demoed here are literally combinations of manual therapy techniques and resistance training. It's just utilizing the concepts of mechanobiology with the said principle. When you give the cells of the body more of a stimulus, they will create more of a desired response. When you add joint mobilization to exercise, the adaptive response is greater. And I make the hypothesis that if you just combine the two, you will amplify the localization of the force. Notice how everything in these motions is rooted down. I cannot compensate. I must absorb the force to the shoulder. No other joints are taking as much force in them, leading to greater long-term adaptation and strength, range, and power production for overhead activities. I get these questions all the time. Is this good for X, Y, or Z condition? The main question I envision coming up after this video is for rotator cuff issues. For the rotator cuff, research shows it's less about the specific exercise and more about the load tolerance of that exercise. If you give the shoulder adequate loading, the tendons around it are more likely to adapt, whether you use eccentric exercise, conventional exercise, scapular exercise, rotator cuff exercise, pec major exercise, high load exercise, or low load exercise. Research shows all exercises are beneficial for rotator cuff issues. The bigger issue is scaling according to need and tolerance, which is why I made these movements. They are completely scalable, not just for strength, but more importantly for range. You may have restrictions in range of motion, but you can find rest in that loaded strength training can improve range of motion naturally without long duration stretching. So let's get to work. Here's a 5-step flow for improving fragile shoulders. Watch to the end for 2 bonus movements for direct rotator cuff muscle and rotator cuff tendon strengthening. Reverse shoulder press, arm length out and up that gives you leverage to pull down while still allowing your elbow to bend. Working arms foot on a buddy that allows you to sink back into your hips. 2 foot lengths out and 1 hand length down and just adjust as needed. Pulling down on the pull to root your scapula down, making sure there's no compensation. Collarbone level, pelvis level. You're ripping through restriction so your thoracic spine is able to dissociate from your shoulder as you press up fully overhead and lower down with control. 7 reps each arm. The goal is 20% body weight for all of those 7 reps. 1 head of the dumbbell bisecting the front and the back of the shoulder. Regress with less weight to no weight and hand in front rather than bisecting the shoulder. If you can't get into that position to bisect the shoulder, feel free to just use weight in front. Reverse pullover, arm length out and up that gives you leverage to pull down while still allowing your elbow to bend. Non-working arms foot on a buddy at a distance out that allows you to sink back into your hips. Start at 2 foot lengths out and 1 hand length down and just adjust as needed. Collarbone level, pelvis level, pull down on the pull to root your scapula down, making sure there's no compensation. Ripping through restriction so your thoracic spine is able to dissociate from your shoulder. Then as you lower down with weight to full shoulder flexion. 6 reps each arm. End goal is 20% body weight for all 6 reps at full shoulder flexion range of motion. Regress with less weight, no weight, and stopping before full shoulder flexion range of motion. Reverse row, arm length out and across that gives you leverage to pull down while still allowing your elbow to bend. Foot on a buddy on the off arm's leg that allows you to sink your hips back. Start at 2 foot lengths out and 1, 2, 3 hand lengths down and just adjust as needed. Collarbone level, pelvis level, pull down on the pull to root your scapula down, making sure there's no compensation. Ripping through the restriction so your thoracic spine is able to dissociate from your working shoulder and scapula. Staring at your elbow, protract fully across to your end range and row back to the top. Elbow past torso. 5 reps each arm. End goal is 20% body weight for 5 reps at full protraction and retraction. Regress with less weight and then stopping before full protraction range of motion. Reverse overhead press. Standing on buddies or slant board, sink down into your hips so you can comfortably depress and retract your shoulder blades fully. Press up from your position of max comfort. If full range is uncomfortable, then just don't go back as far. End goal is 65% body weight for 3 total reps. Maintaining this tempo. Explode Pause 1 second, down 1, 2, 3. Pause and explode. Using buddies or a slant board, sink down into your hips so you can comfortably depress and retract your shoulder blades fully. Lower down into your max comfort of hip flexion, then using a wide grip, row from that position of max comfort of hip flexion. If full range of hip flexion is too uncomfortable for your back, just don't go down as far. End goal is 3 total reps with 65% of body weight in additional load. Lowering down to that max hip flexion, wide grip, row, explode up, hold, down 1, 2, 3, pause, explode up. The next movement isn't directly for the shoulder, but I like to reverse out all the gripping that we did with our wrists and forearms, so feel free to give it a go. Collarbone and pelvis level up against the bench, off arm, elbow, resting, working arm, walking out until you feel a light stretch underneath the forearm. Fall on the wrist, elbows up, begin the hand ability flow. Start with pulses until you feel no stretch, then swipers until you feel no stretch, then finger pulses until you feel no stretch, then full hand raises until you feel no stretch, then reverse opposition until you feel no stretch. 20 reps, 3 sets on each hand. 20 reps, but not 20 reps for each position, meaning each position is a stage. If you don't feel stretch at a certain stage, move to the next one until you accumulate 20 total reps. Okay, I told you if you stick around, I'll give you some extra tips for the rotator cuff. So here you go. You may have direct weaknesses in the rotator cuff itself, but you can find hope that you aren't doomed to that weak cuff. Your rotator cuff strength is modifiable. You may have pinpoint issues on the tendon itself. Take hope that you can scale loading on the tendon. Indirectly by improving transfer of force from the muscle to the tendon by first improving the quality of the muscle, and then directly by using resisted isometrics to get strain on the tendon itself, yielding greater resilience and durability long term. So step 1, indirectly improve shoulder tendon health by putting strain on the rotator cuff muscles, specifically in this exercise, the infraspinatus muscle. Connecting to the back of the shoulder blade to the head of the shoulder, it's directly responsible for dampening forces on the shoulder joint. The less elasticity and ability to control the shoulder as it's performing a throwing motion, the more force is experienced by the joint with each overhead activity that you perform, which can lead to a whole slew of issues long term. Elasticity is synonymous with stiffness. Can this muscle develop stiffness isometrically so the tendon can pull on the bone to create movement? This is the dumbbell external rotation, and I'll let my buddy Riley go more in depth about how to progress and regress this exercise.
The external rotation is one of my top exercises for healthy shoulders. Growing up as a baseball player, I threw a lot of pitches. This exercise alone has helped to reverse out any pain I've had as a throwing athlete. If this movement is too difficult or even causes pain, there are a few ways to regress. Simplest way to regress this one is to grab lighter weight. You would be shocked. Some of the strongest guys I know who can push the most weight out of their chest have spent little time working the opposite and are very weak and limited at this exercise. Another way we can do this one is to get in line with a bench, vertical, tie the elbow to the top of the bench so you can press it against. Depending on the height of the person, you might need to scale that out. Elbow pin to the top, and you're working the same range to the bottom and up through the top. This will really help lock in the elbow, and you can master the form this way too. A couple more to go off the external rotation that will only help build the back side of the shoulders are 1 being the trap 3 raise, as well as the powell raise.
Finally, step 2, directly improve shoulder tendon health by putting strain from the muscles onto the tendon. This is the rotator cuff raise. So first, get a barbell in a rack, the height of which will depend on your limb length, but a starting point for me is just below the crest of my pelvis, able to be pinned by my opposite hand. Using any stable, non-elastic material that you can pull on. I have ATG equipment, and you can use the low cable strap for this exercise. Slip your hand into the strap and pin the other end of the strap on the bar. Stand in a staggered stance. The external rotators attach on the back of the scapula and connect to the head of the shoulder. We need to root the scapula down and let the shoulder rotate in front. This will put max tension on the muscle tendon unit. The moment my collarbone, which connects to the shoulder blade on the back, rotates in front, that tells me I'm losing that tension and entering into protraction. I'm no longer putting max tension on the muscle tendon unit. So instead, inch that hand until just before my collarbone begins to rise, which for me would be about right here. From here, we need isometric tension from the external rotators pulling on that strap for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. My shoulder and scapula, the joints responsible for creating that external rotation of the shoulder, are blocked from moving. I am pulling the strap in this direction. My muscle is blocked from moving, but it is contracting, meaning all of its tension can only be pulling on the rotator cuff tendons, putting strain onto it and giving it stimulus to become more elastic, meaning less likelihood likelihood of rupture or damage, and more likelihood of improving athletic performance. So the same progression for these, just like we did for the Achilles raise. Start with 3 reps, 3 sets, 3 seconds, 1 day per week, and work towards long-term 3 reps, 4 sets, 5-second holds, 3 days per week. And you'll be at that research back time duration of 3 minutes, tensile stimulus on the tendon per week. Be gentle. Introduce this stimulus patiently. Perhaps even do just less than maximal contractions until you gauge response for the next day. Then increase slowly over time, just like you do anything else. So, reverse shoulder press, reverse pullover, reverse row, reverse overhead press, and reverse barbell row to get that muscular activation that accords to pulling the joints back where they ought to be and ripping through any adaptive restrictions up top and in between. Then dumbbell external rotation to increase muscular stiffness of the infraspinatus muscle, which will increase proper force transfer to the tendon in motions like the rotator cuff raise, which will directly improve tendon stiffness, giving you comprehensive adaptation towards a more effective shoulder slingshot. If you're new to this channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Nearly all of my content has been inspired in some fashion by community response. Comment below what you want me to make a video on. Check my description for a link and discount code to my online programming system for less than $25 to start for the first month. No contracts whatsoever. If you want to discuss questions you have about training, my Instagram account is also linked in the description, as well as all the references for all the stuff I blabbered about for the past 10-15 minutes. Here's to our greater pursuit of truth.